Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to 2A News Now. And as always, here at 2A News Now, you get your Second Amendment news straightforward and to the point with no BS added in. I'm sorry I haven't been able to make a video in the past couple of days. My grandson has been sick, and of course they're not allowed to go to school if they're sick. So I've been on grandpa duty for the past couple of days. But the last video I did make was that the ATF killed Bryan Malinowski for selling firearms without a license. And I mentioned in that video, yes, I know he shot at them. Thus they shot back and killed him. But to me it was actually murder, because they didn't have to go about it the way they did. He had no record whatsoever, and they very easily could have waited until he got into his car and stopped him on the streets, or even arrested him at his job at the airport. And I guess that makes me lucky that I'm still alive, because in October of 2020, I had a visit from the ATF as well, and them accusing me of the same thing. But they didn't raid my home. They didn't shoot my dog or shoot me. And if you've been with me for a while, you know what happened back then in 2020. But I have a lot of new subscribers, and since what happened to Bryan Malinowski just recently, I thought I would talk about it again, and maybe it can help some people out. Leading up to what happened in October of 2020, for the past 5 years, I had been the lone caregiver of my mother. And in August of 2020, she started to go downhill very quickly, and she ended up in hospice for 2 weeks until she finally passed away. And of course I was very devastated, even though I knew it was coming. And that was still during part of the vid. So it took 2 weeks plus for the coroner to do an examination and for me to get a death certificate. And in between that time, trying to take care of all of her financial things and calling credit card companies and creditors, which is something I've never had to do before. Some of them wanted death certificates, which I couldn't give them for a while, and some of them didn't at all. And like I said, that was in August. And one Friday in October, after all of this was taken care of, I'd come back in the afternoon after doing some errands and going grocery shopping. And on my door was this card from somebody from the ATF. And it says, "Troy, please call me at this certain number." So I said to myself, why would the ATF want to do anything with me? So after putting away my groceries, it was after 5 o'clock, and I called the number, and I got a recording. And I left a message. So of course the whole weekend, I'm thinking, why would the ATF want to talk to me? I know I haven't done anything wrong. And to find out what was going on, I even left a message on Saturday and a message on Sunday. And I still didn't receive a call back. So I thought to myself, it must not be that important if they're not calling me back. And I thought for sure that Monday I would hear back from somebody. But I didn't. Before I go any further, I forgot to mention, before this happened, for years and years, I had been a firearm collector. I've collected firearms from the range of less than $100 to thousands and thousands of dollars. And very rarely have I ever traded in a firearm or sold a firearm out of my collection. And when I've done so, I've done it legally. And it was never to ever make a profit. And it was to turn around and use what I got for that firearm to purchase another firearm. Finally, on Tuesday, I received a phone call from the ATF agent. And they said they wanted to meet with me. I should have known something was wrong at that time when she said she wanted to meet me at the local police station with her partner. And I told her that wasn't possible. And I said, since you've been to my house already, why don't you meet me at the house? Of course now, in hindsight, that was the complete wrong thing to do. But remember, my mom had just passed away a couple of months before that. In dealing with everything that goes along with that, I wasn't in my right mind. And I asked her on the phone, can you tell me what this is all about? And she said it concerns a firearm that was found in the possession of a felon, that when it was traced, it came back to me. And I asked her if she could tell me what firearm it was. And she said it was a Beretta PX4 Storm 40 caliber. And right away I told her that I remember selling that legally at a gun show through a face-to-face transfer. And she said, well, we still need to meet with you. And I agreed to the time the next day for them to come to the house. And you guys don't have to beat me up in the comment section. I know that's not the right thing to do, but like I said, I was still devastated from my mom passing away. The next day they came to the house, her and her partner. I had them show me their credentials, and I had them sit at my dining room table. The other thing is, I have nothing to hide because I know I've done nothing wrong. But it's still not the right way to go about it. I should have asked if they had a warrant on the phone, and if she said no, then I should have said, that's it, I'm not going to talk to you. They asked me where and when I sold the firearm, that I'd sold it at a gun show, and I'd purchased it about 3 months before on Gunbroker. And I shot it quite a few times, but I just didn't like how it felt in my hand. And they're really nice guns, but it just wasn't the gun for me. So I took it to that gun show, but actually take it to tables to see if I could trade it in on another firearm. So I took it to as many tables as possible, and they weren't giving me what I thought I should get for it. So I went outside and got a drink and sat down, and I was going to go back in and try again. Of course, at a lot of gun shows, you have guys walking inside and or outside trying to sell firearms as well. And this was in Florida. And in Florida, you can do private sales. And the person has to be a Florida resident, and they have to have a Florida ID. And you have to ask them if they're a felon. And if they say no, then you can sell them the firearm. But also they say, if you feel that this person is lying, or they could be a convicted felon, it's your responsibility as the seller not to sell them that firearm. When I was sitting outside, and like I said, there was other people out there trying to sell firearms, I had one guy come up to me and said he wanted to look at it. And he liked it, and we agreed on a price. And I asked him if he was a felon, and he said no. I said, all I need to do is see your Florida driver's license. And he told me he's a dual resident, that he resides in another state, I can't remember which one, and he lives in Florida as well, but that he only had a license from that other state. And I very easily could have sold it to him, but that would have been against the law. And I told him, I'm sorry, but I can't sell it to him. And about 10 minutes later, I was getting ready to go back in, and another guy came up to me. And the same thing, he looked at the firearm, we agreed on a price, and I asked him if he was a felon, and he said no. Then I asked to see his Florida driver's license. And he tells me he doesn't have one. And I told him, I'm sorry, I can't sell you the firearm. And I've had numerous people tell me in the past that they think one or both of those guys were undercover ATF agents, which is definitely possible. And while I was talking to that last guy before he left, and there was another guy standing there looking over his shoulder. And after that guy left, he asked if he could look at the firearm. And I showed it to him, and he looked it over, and he liked it, and we agreed on a price. And I asked him if he was a convicted felon, and he said no. And I asked to see his Florida ID, and he showed me a valid Florida ID, his Florida driver's license. And I made sure he was 21 years or older, and I believe he was either 23 or 24 at the time. And I didn't get any weird vibes from him. And he paid me cash for the firearm, and it was his. And in Florida, you don't have to write any driver's license numbers down, the names down, or anything like that. That's just Florida's law. Some places are different, and some places are the same, and some places you can't do that at all. And of course, in hindsight, to protect myself, I should have written his information down. So anyway, back to the ATF agents at the house. So once again, they said they were there because that firearm that I sold to that guy, they claim it ended up in the hands of a convicted felon. I also told the woman on the phone a description of what the guy looked like. And I asked him, did the description I gave you match the guy who had the firearm who was a felon? And they said no. And so I got to thinking for a minute, and I said, can you show me a picture of that guy? Because maybe he was hanging around there as well, and then you will know that this guy did a straw purchase. And they told me they couldn't show me the picture. Well, why in the hell not? Some people have tried to tell me that they just made that up. So for a while, the two ATF agents played the good cop, bad cop routine. They would ask the same question, but in a different way, to see if I would change my story, and of course I didn't. And then the fishing expedition started. The woman ATF agent asked, how many firearms do you have? And I said, what does that have to do with what's going on with the guy who had the firearm? And she says, well, we've noticed you've purchased a lot of firearms in the past couple of months. I said, yes, because I collect firearms. Instead of me just saying, it's time for you to leave. And she says, well, we've noticed a particular buying pattern. I go, what does that mean? Well, you're buying a lot of firearms. I said, yes, because I'm a firearm collector. Then she took a piece of paper, or two pieces of paper, I can't remember, out of a folder that she had. And she started naming off firearms that I'd purchased in the past 6, 8 months, or even a year, I can't remember. And she went down this line of firearms. And I'm going, yes, 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 yes. And I went like this, firearm collector. And she said a couple of times when we were talking, we see a particular buying pattern. And I'm going, what do you mean by a buying pattern? I said, they're firearms that I purchased for my collection that I still have in my collection. Every one of them she mentioned. And that's when the guy ATF agent spoke up and said, we believe that you're selling firearms without a license for profit. And I said, how do you get that from one firearm? And I asked them straight out, do you have one person or more than one person that Troy is selling numerous firearms to people? And they said no. I said, all you have is that I told you that I sold that firearm legally at the show, and they even agreed what I did was legal. And by the way, I did ask if the guy used it in any crimes, and they said no. And that's when they decided to pull this other piece of paper out of their file. And I'll post this with some of the stuff redacted, which would be my name and address. It just basically says, that they're accusing me of selling firearms without a license, and what could happen to me if I continued to do so. And of course, I protested in all kinds of different ways. I said, how can you come to that conclusion? With one firearm, just one being sold. And she sat there silently, but this guy thought he was a tough guy, and he's saying, well, it was approved by our boss. I says, I don't give a crap who it is approved by, because you guys are barking up the wrong tree. So he started reading this whole freaking thing, and like I said, I'll post this so you can read it. And then it comes to the end, and they asked me to sign this. And I said, I'm not going to sign it because it's not true. And you'll see when I post it, it says refuse to sign. But here's the kicker. As they get up to leave and they're walking away, the guy turns around and says to me, and by the way, don't sell any more firearms through face-to-face transfers or a personal transfer, however you want to word it. You're only allowed to sell them through FFLs. It just shows you what these people are all about. And it also goes to show you why you don't let them in your house. What I did, what should be done, if an ATF agent or agents show up at your house, if they don't have a warrant, tell them to kick rocks. And afterwards, I did contact a lawyer. And he told me this happens all the time. And there's nothing that can be done about it. So I guess I'm lucky in a lot of ways. I let these people into my house, which I shouldn't have done. I talked to them, which I shouldn't have done. But one of the big things that I took away from it, if they actually had something on me, they would have cuffed me and took me away. Don't you agree? They were fishing for the Troy big tuna, and they didn't catch him. But there's something else I have to add to this. The neighborhood I lived in at that time was mainly a lot of retirees. A lot of older folks in the evening walking around the block. A lot of folks doing a lot of yard work and doing a lot of gardening. And of course, they're very nosy neighbors as well. Because a couple of days after they left, I walked to my mailbox to get the mail and bring up the trash can. And at the same time, my next door neighbor was doing the same thing. And as we've done over the years, we say hi and we'll talk a little bit. And I was surprised when he said, did those ATF agents ever get a hold of you? And I bet you my jaw dropped all the way down to my feet. And I said, how did you know about that? So what happened the day they came to the house when I wasn't home and left the card on the door? After they left my house, they went to his house and asked if they had a phone number for me. And he told him no. And he had also showed them his credentials. He said, thank you. And he started to walk away. And of course, the nosy neighbors that they all are, he says, what is this all about? Instead of the ATF agent telling him, well, I can't divulge that or I can't tell you that. He says, we're the ATF. It's about guns, of course. But of course, they're alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives. But he had to say, we're the ATF. It's about guns. So I didn't have to give my neighbor an explanation. We had lived next door to each other for about 15 years or so. So I just told him I sold a firearm legally at a gun show, and it ended up in the hands of a convicted felon. So I thought all my surprises were done with, and that was it. A day or so later, I was outside doing some yard work on the other side of my property. And my other next door neighbor was out. He came over. He said, I almost called the police the other day to your house. And I said, why? I said, when was this? And it was that Friday that I wasn't at home when the ATF agents came to the house. He said I was outside doing yard work like he was the day he was talking to me. And he said 2 vehicles pulled up to your house, but not in the driveway. They parked in front of the house by the street. He said a man got out of one car and a woman got out of the other car. He said they rang the doorbell and they knocked on the door. He goes, he could hear that they were knocking pretty loudly. He said then the knocks got really loud, like somebody was not trying to burst down the door, but was really hammering on the door. And he said he thought that they were going to break into the house. Also, by the way, I forgot to say that I have no trespassing signs on my front lawn, on my front door, and no soliciting on my front door. So instead of leaving after knocking on the door for God knows how long, he tells me they start walking around the side and then to the back of my yard. His house sits back a little bit farther, so if he walks to the back of his property, he can see the back of my house. And he actually watched them walk around and go to the back of my house. And I had a screened-in porch on the back of the house. And they were putting their hands up, looking into my screen porch, and actually tried to open that screen porch door. But of course I had it locked. And he said they looked in there for quite a long time. And then they even started knocking on a glass sliding door that's not covered by that porch. And then he said they actually came around the other side of the house, and then they left. Now, unfortunately, at that time, I did not have any security cameras at all. Of course, right after that happened, all that changed. I am pro-good cop, but the things the ATF has done over the years, and over the decades gives me a bad taste in my mouth. And they need to go after the criminals, not the law-abiding citizens. And when this happened and I made a video about it, I made a couple of videos about it actually, I had so many people contact me saying this happened to them as well. And this was still during the Trump administration. And as we all know, now that Biden has taken over, it's got 1,000,000% worse. So I guess I'm lucky in a couple of counts, like I said earlier, that I wasn't arrested because I didn't do anything wrong and they knew it. Also because they didn't shoot my dog or shoot me and kill me, like what happened to Bryan Malinowski. And I'm not a lawyer, but what I said I did when they came to the house, you should do the exact opposite if they come to your house. The first thing, I should have never invited them back to the house. I should have asked them if they had a warrant. And if they said no, that's it. And if they would have showed up to the house again, do you have a warrant? No. Sorry, I'm not talking to you. Get off my property. It says no trespassing. Because they're just there to hem you up. And law enforcement is not your friends. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it at all. As always, I appreciate everybody's support with the channel. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I appreciate you liking, sharing, and subscribing, leaving comments, and hitting those post notifications. And I invite you to come back and watch my next video.